All right, today we are zooming way in to explore the fundamental building block of literally every living thing on Earth. We're talking everything from the tiniest bacteria to the biggest blue whale.
So let's kick things off with a pretty simple question. What is an onion, really? I mean, besides the layers that make you cry when you're cooking. The answer to that question is actually the key to a hidden world, a kind of common blueprint that connects that onion to a giant redwood tree, and yeah, even to you.
To find that answer, we've got to go on a little journey, all the way back to the 17th century. We're looking for a physicist and inventor who, pretty much by accident, was the very first person to peek into this hidden world. So this is what a guy named Robert Hooke wrote down back in 1665. He had built his own microscope, pointed it at a super thin slice of cork, and what he saw, well, it wasn't solid at all. It was this bizarre honeycomb-like structure. Can you just imagine being the very first person in history to see something like that?
He needed a name for these tiny compartments, so he called them cells, which comes from the Latin word for a little room. And look, it might sound like a simple name, but this was an absolutely monumental discovery. For the first time ever, someone had found actual, concrete proof that living things were built from these tiny, separate units.
And that one single observation, it kicked off a whole scientific revolution. Hooke basically opened the door, and pretty soon after, another scientist, Leeuwenhoek, peeked right through it and discovered tiny living cells swimming around in pond water. It took about another century, but then Schleiden and Schwann started connecting the dots, proposing that, wait a minute, all plants and animals are made of cells. And finally, a scientist named Virchow added the last crucial piece to the puzzle. New cells can only come from cells that already exist.
So you put all these discoveries together, and they solidify into what we now call cell theory. And this theory, it basically defines the very nature of life as we know it.
And the theory itself is beautifully simple. It says the cell is the absolute base unit of life, period. Every single thing a living organism does, breathing, moving, thinking, growing, all of it happens first at the cellular level. This is the microscopic engine that runs the whole show. And life seems to use these building blocks in two main ways. On one hand, you've got unicellular organisms, where the whole creature is just one single self-sufficient cell. But then you have us, multicellular organisms. We're like a massive community of trillions of cells that have all grouped together, specialized, and formed this incredibly complex being. And the amazing part? Every single one of us started as just one of those cells.
So, if the cell is life's basic building block, what's actually going on inside it? Well, it really helps to imagine each cell as its own bustling, microscopic city, with tons of different parts all working together to keep things running smoothly. Every city has a basic layout, right? And our cell city is no different. You got the plasma membrane, which is kind of like the city limits, controlling what comes in and what goes out. The nucleus is City Hall, the main control center. All the action happens on the city grounds, which we call the cytoplasm. And that's where all the specialized workers, the organelles, do all their different jobs. So let's start our tour at City Hall, the nucleus. This is the command center, the big boss. It holds the DNA, which is basically the master blueprints for everything the cell will ever need to build or do. It directs all the chemical activities, telling every other part of the city what its job is and exactly when to do it.
Of course, no city can run without power, and that's where the mitochondria come in. These are the absolute powerhouses. They take in nutrients and convert them into a molecule called ATP, which is kind of like the energy currency for the whole cell. Without the mitochondria, the entire city would just grind to a halt.
Now, a busy city produces a lot of goods, and that stuff needs to get to specific places. Well, the Golgi apparatus is the city's post office. It takes proteins and fats, modifies them, packages them all up, and then ships them out to wherever they're needed, whether that's somewhere inside the cell or even outside the city limits entirely.
And with all that activity, you're going to have trash. Lots of it. That's where the lysosomes come in. They're the waste disposal and recycling crew. They're basically these little sacks filled with powerful digestive enzymes. They break down old, worn-out cell parts or any foreign invaders. Here's a wild fact, though. If a cell gets really badly damaged, its lysosomes can actually burst and digest the whole cell from the inside out, which is why they sometimes get called suicide bags.
Okay, so we've had a little tour of our microscopic city. But how does one of these tiny cities become, well, a person? A whole organism with trillions of cells. How do we grow?
Or how does a cut on our finger heal?
The answer is this incredible process called cell division. Just like Virchow figured out way back in 1855, new cells don't just pop up out of nowhere. Nope, they are always formed from cells that already exist, by splitting and multiplying to drive all of our growth and repair.
For growth and repair, that process is called mitosis, and it's really just this elegant act of duplication. It all starts with one mother cell. The first thing it does is make a perfect copy of its genetic blueprints, and then it simply splits right down the middle, creating two new, totally identical daughter cells. And that's it. That one process, just repeated trillions and trillions of times, is how you grew from a single cell into the person you are right now.
And that brings us right back to the beginning, doesn't it? That onion, it's a community of cells, and so are you. Your heart, your brain, your skin, they're all just different neighborhoods in this sprawling nation of trillions upon trillions of tiny living cities, all communicating and working together in almost perfect harmony.
So we've gone from a simple slice of cork all the way to the blueprint of our own existence. But it kind of leaves us with one last, really deep question to think about. If life's foundation is this single, functional unit, where exactly is the line between just a colony of cells and you?